Hello and welcome to the Addie model. In this model, we will be looking at the model of instructional design that focuses on the 5 main parts of the Addie design, which are namely the analysis model, the design model, the developmental, and implementation and evaluation model. What we will be looking at is what exactly is the Addie model, and based on the research, Addie is a generic process model. It is one of the older and first developed models of instructional design. It is used by instructional designers and trainers. There are several other models that are a spin-off from the Addie model, and you may have used it in your classrooms or in different fields, whether it's training or business or just in the general workforce, because it's one of the models that can be replicated and used in different avenues. It's an instructional system design model. Sometimes it's referred to as ISD, and it's most of the current models, such as the Dick and Carey model and the Kemp model. They are some of the spin-offs that I spoke about earlier that came from the Addie model. Within the 5 components, it's more of a backward design. It's an iterative design process where you analyze and you evaluate within the analysis phase, then you move on to the design process. Once you're there, you're still analyzing, reflecting back on what was done in the analysis, and you go on in that pattern in each model. As you can see in this diagram here, when you look at the analysis, there is an arrow connecting back to evaluation, because evaluation is such a major component of this model. In each step, you have to evaluate. And even at the very end, even though it's step 5 where you're doing a comprehensive evaluation, you evaluate as you go. Each area is evaluated, and then there's a reflection on the previous area for evaluation. And when you look at the models individually, or the different components, when you look at the analysis portion of it, it tells you that you look at the performance requirements, you look at the training requirements. In the design section, we're looking for learning maps, where we're going, we're looking for the objectives, the test items, exercise, we look for drafts. For the implementation section, as we are saying, we train. This is where we actually do the work. And the evaluation process, we look at what was done. Here's a better breakdown of how this model is carried out, because when you look here in the analysis section, first you have to do a needs analysis to determine if there is a need for the whole process to be done. We're looking at who is the target audience, why the training or the lesson needs to be done, will it be taught, or what will be taught, and what are the methods of delivery, when will this be done, when will it be completed. So we're looking in a trajectory for beginning to end. We're also looking at the when in terms of what is the best time to do the training, whether it's morning or afternoon. We also look at the where will the training take place based on the participants. Will it be online, will it be in face-to-face, or will it be a combination model? We also look at how many skills will be taught and what are the best methods of delivery for the content. So this is one of the very crucial areas, because we are analyzing our roadmap. Where are we going with this? But as you can see, that is in red. The main important part here is the learning goals. This is where we set the foundation for what are we doing and what we will be evaluating. Next, we move on to the design phase. In the design phase, it's just as important. These 2 middle phase, the design, and the next one that follows, the developmental phase, I think they are the most important based on what I've researched, because the instructional designer here, they actually write the learning goals and performance objectives. They develop test items and instruments here. They create lesson plans, and they identify and select resources. If you want to make a comparison, for those of you who are classroom teachers, this is where you do your lesson plan based on your classroom, what are your needs, what are your focus for the learner. If you go back to the analysis model, this is when you're looking at maybe your grade level or your school. How will this be done based on a bigger scope? Now we're designing based on an individual or a small scale need, what we need to do here. And you realize sometimes when you do lesson plannings in group, you create lesson plans for the grade, but you may go back and tweak it and create your individual lesson plans. What are the resources you have that will facilitate the learning and the lessons here? Then we move on to the developmental phase, which is similar to the design phase. In the developmental phase, drafts are created. Examples includes manuals, workbooks, and programs. So whatever materials you will be using in the bigger project, this is where you start to draft them. In this phase, you may also work on revising, refining materials, and your revision and your refinement is normally based on feedback or your individual analysis, because most of the times in the developmental phase, an instructional designer will go back and ask colleagues. They may ask the people who they're planning the lessons or the products for, and that once they get the feedback, they may see that it's not feasible and they have to fix what needs to be fixed, or they may see that it's not going to work based on their own observation. So feedback comes in different ways, but this is one of the stages where they're pretty much stuck for a time until they decide that, okay, everything is fine in the developmental stage, so I can move to the next stage, because sometimes they go back and forth between developmental, design, and analysis. These three phases, they go back and forth just until everything is worked out. In here, once the logistics are worked out within these three phases, the middle section, then they move on to the next other very important section, which is the implementation phase. This is where the rubber hits the road. In this implementation phase, this is real world application. This is theory into practice. Everything that was done in the drawing room, in the planning sections, this is where it's actually tested out on real people in real time. Project managers or site representatives at this time, they're the ones ensuring that everything is working smoothly, everything is functional as it's supposed to go. For example, if you're planning a tutoring session for after school, this is when the person who's facilitating it makes sure that all the books are there, they have the pages, everything is good to go. The instructional designer or the trainer, the person who created this program, now they go in the background, but they're still there as a support system, making sure that everything is working. If it's a computer project, they're providing technical support. A common example I realized with this was when Blackboard was implemented at my institution. The designers were there for 6 months and they did everything they were supposed to do. However, when it went live in the implementation phase, they stayed on for 6 months extra to make sure that they're supporting the persons who are at the forefront of this. So they're making sure it's working. And because they want to see results going back to the analysis and over to the first phases, they want to make sure that the learning goals are in place, and when it comes time for evaluation at the summative level, they have done everything they need to do. But they're also completing summative evaluations in this phase, making sure that whatever they did was working. They look at how the students or the learners or users, the end users, are actually progressing through the development. If something is not working at the implementation phase, they can also stop and then revert back to the developmental phase where they may fix something and then get back to the implementation phase. The last phase in this process is the evaluation phase. In the evaluation phase, they measure the entire program. But before they're looking at the entire program, they go back and they look at the 2 types of assessments that were used throughout. Or actually, they're using the summative assessment now, but they're looking back at the formative assessment to see if the model is working. And they use a lot of these formative assessments to decide whether the program was acceptable or not. The summative evaluation should occur after the final version of the instruction or product. So this is where they do it at the end. But before they do the summative, like I said, they're always looking back at the formative assessment in each section. And this evaluation, or the summative evaluation, it is used to measure the efficiency and effectiveness of the program or the instruction. And when you look here, depending on the area in which the Addie model was used, we're looking at the product evaluation. Was the product that was created successful? Is it working? Is it feasible? If you're building a bridge, can it stand alone based on what you've used? Did the materials work? Did the process work? If you're using classroom instructions, for example, did the children learn what was expected of them? Is the program that was designed working efficiently and effectively for the desired audience? And just as a quick review, let's look at the Addie model again. It tells you the Addie model for analysis. Information is gathered about the intended audience. This is where the needs analysis is done. The design, where you go ahead and you make your plan. It's like you're creating your blueprint now. You're building a house. Here is the developmental stage. You create and assemble the material. This is where you start putting, if we're building a house, you're putting the blocks, you're putting the steel, you're putting everything together. It's like playing with Legos. You start to create right here. This is the creation phase. If you go back to the design, you're starting to draw, you're forming your ideas, and then you start to actually do. So then you go back to the implementation phase. After you start to create the stuff, you implement it. Okay, now that I've started it, here is what I want you to do with it. Go ahead, and this is where you run with it. You actually start to test it out. You review and you ensure that the references and the materials, the activities are ready to go. And the last stage is the evaluation stage. You evaluate your product to see if everything is working as was planned. And after you evaluate your product, you may go back to stage one, because as I say, it consists of somewhat of a backbone design model. But normally, once you're at the evaluation stage, everything should be good, because this is a project where there's constant evaluation throughout. This is just my presentation in the Addie model. I hope you've learned something, and we will address further in the question section. These are the references. A lot of great videos and tutorials are out there in the Addie model, and thank you for listening. Have a great day.